Hello, this is my assignment number 6 for Chapter 5, answering questions 1 and 2. So first off, the 7 areas of effective teaching include planning for instruction, time and class management, task presentation and task structure, communication, instructional information, use of questions, and lesson review and closure. So the first question to look at: the next time you teach a lesson, provide a self-assessment of your own skills in each of the 7 areas of effective teaching presented in this chapter. What evidence did you use to make your assessment? So to complete this question, I used my lesson Make It, Take It, which is an underhand and overhand throwing practice for my first grade classes. So when looking at the first area of effective teaching for my self-assessment, which would be planning for instruction, I noticed that I used visual instruction for the cues and had them posted on the wall, which allowed me to plan effectively to understand which cues I wanted to use for the lesson. I also selected the appropriate equipment for my students' developmental level and for a range of learners in my class. And by preparing ahead of time, I was able to determine what I wanted to use for the class. And I also had appropriate timing for directions each round and for closure, which helped to plan ahead and decide the timing I would spend for each part of the lesson. So looking at area 2, time and class management, I took attendance during my students' instant activity warm-up, where they were able to review and practice different types of locomotor skills, and these are also posted for students, which is time efficient and helps the students understand they come into class and they're able to look at the wall and see what we're doing for an instant activity. Students were also a part of the lesson by assisting in the transitioning for each round by helping set up equipment. We had to set up dots each round, or hotspots, and they were able to assist with that, which helped each round move a little bit more smoother. The equipment was also color-coded, and I had it all set up prior to the class starting, which allowed students to understand where it went, where they should be, and how to set it up during transitioning. Students also are accustomed to following a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown, and then I'll say freeze, which is an efficient stop signal for them. I use this many times in between each throwing round in order to switch up the types of throwing and to set up for the next round. I also had efficient class management by ensuring that all students were listening before giving instructions. This helps my students understand what was coming next, and also be aware that all the students are receiving the same information. For area 3 during my lesson, I had the cues and the vocab posted on the board, and these are the same cues and vocab that I used during instruction. I also provided a full and correct model so students knew the expectation and desired outcome. So I actually had a few students who were helping me with demonstration, and sometimes it just didn't go as smoothly as I wanted to, so we made sure that we redid it so that all students could see the expectations and what was supposed to happen and what was intended for the skill level. I also explained the task duration by using a timer for each round, so students knew that they had 6 minutes per round to collect as many dots as they can by throwing each type of equipment into different sized buckets. I also assigned students to specific sessions of the gym by partnering up and going into an assigned hula hoop color. This helped students be aware of where they should be in the gym and also helped with safety. I also explained that students, that they had a choice of throwing from specific distances and at different targets, so that they were actually set up, and it's designed to create different difficulty levels for students and provides lots of variation in the activity. So for area 4, for communication, I ensured that I spoke clearly and ensured that I had all students' attention for each piece of instruction. And then I also tend to use voice inflections a lot, and a big one for this lesson was stressing that collecting the hot spots before retrieving the ball. This really helped with class management and expectations for students, and by emphasizing the word before, students were able to then remember the order of collecting back their equipment and being able to quickly move through transitioning between them and their partner. And then I always use checking for understanding questions, and in this lesson specifically, it was important so that students understood which throwing form they were supposed to be using per round and the cues that would go with it. So for Area 5, instructional information, I moved around the gym to be able to provide feedback between each round and to specific partner groups and to the individualized students that needed it. This was super important so that all students got what they needed and were able to continuously partake in the lesson. I also used a combination of verbal cues and visual cues during my demonstration so that while I was performing a demonstration and while my students were helping me with the demonstration, I was reiterating those cues to go along with the visual of the hands-on demonstration. And I also walked around and gave verbal guides to students who needed assistance. I had a few students who were a little bit confused even after demonstration and instruction. So as we began each round, I would just go and check in on them and instruct them to remember that they need to throw into a certain bucket, and then would give them a little bit more of guiding direction where the other students might not have needed that assistance. Area 6, use of questions. I found that in this lesson, I asked a lot of behavioral questions between tasks, and this kind of helped with my transitioning and to ensure that equipment was where it was supposed to be so that students had the appropriate equipment prepared for each round. And then I also focused in on using a lot of wait time to allow students to develop their answers. Since we're using 2 different throwing patterns, it was really important that students thought about the correct cues before shouting out or trying to answer the question. And Area 7, during the self-assessment, I really focused on my transitions at the end of class. This is something I've been working on. And something I found helpful is having the students put their equipment away and help pick up the class before we go and meet into the center. That way there's no equipment around them, there's no distraction, and we can really talk together about how the lesson went and reflect back on that. Now moving on to question 2. So assume you are a mentor teacher trying to help a novice PE teacher improve in each of the 7 areas of effective teaching. What advice would you give that novice teacher for learning how to be effective in each area? So going through just a little bit of advice that I found helpful for myself being a first-year teacher and something I would really emphasize for somebody new. Would be preparation is key to effective teaching, and to be purposeful in your teaching by intentionally developing lessons and selecting appropriate equipment. This is something that I really tend to focus on because I feel better myself if I prepare and am aware of what I want to happen and the expectations for my students before even going out and teaching the lesson, and ensuring that I have the right equipment ready and chosen so that it best suits all the learners in my class. My second piece of advice would be to always have your back to the wall and circulating while monitoring, because these are both helpful for interacting with lots of students and as many as possible during the task, and it also ensures that the expected outcomes or the rules that you want students to be following are actually taking place, and then also helps go back and work on those cues that we talked to students who might need a little bit more feedback. My third piece of advice would be that students always want to know what's going on and what's next, so applying time limits and letting them know about the task duration is really helpful, and it actually helps them stay on task more because they know, oh, I have 6 minutes to participate in this and then we're going to move on. So it really helps them zero in on what they're working on and stay focused. And for Area 4, I would suggest really using those voice inflections. This has helped me a lot to provide emphasis on important parts of the task, and it also can boost attention and engagement for students, because just that little slight change in your voice to show some precedent and importance on something really catches their attention and keeps them engaged. And always checking for understanding questions are really helpful. They help you to make sure that you are staying on task and that students are meeting their goal, but it also helps for the students as well to make sure that they do understand what is going on, what they're learning. For area 5, really stressing that feedback is super important, and the more feedback, the better. Positive feedback is always a good thing for students, and even the students who you think may have been on task and really working hard, you should always give them a little bit more feedback, in my opinion, because they don't always get it. So something in my make it take it activity from question 1 that I would always do is walk around. Even the students that have a really good mature throwing pattern, I would give them the feedback and say that I love the way that you're stepping with your opposite foot, and I love the way that you're following through with your throw, because these simple little things emphasize the cues and encourage students to keep trying their best. And then always combine the cues with verbal, written, and visually demonstrated instructions, because this can help you reach all types of learners and can really provide emphasis on the skills. My advice for Area 6 would be to utilize individual questioning and group answers. So ask specific questions that students can raise their hand quietly, and you can choose on them and they will answer it, and you maybe it's correct, maybe it's not, but you can redirect them. However, it's also important to use group answers, because there's some times where you may not have a lot of time and it's time efficient. You can ask questions that you know the whole group will at least attempt to answer, and then that way you can redirect and try and see where the students are as a whole. And then also using verbal questions for movement responses to assist in checking for understanding, such as you could ask for the cues for an underhand throw and have the students act it out as they are saying the cues all together. This is a good way to kind of make sure that all the students are on the same page and they all are understanding what they learned for the day. It's a good connection between cognitive and psychomotor the psychomotor domains. My apologies. All right, and area 7, the last piece of advice that I would give would don't be afraid to give students more time to think about the question if you think they're close to a correct answer. Use redirect questions and stay consistent in rules, as only calling on students with a quietly raised hand, and avoid passive listening time by asking students questions that allow them to reflect on instruction in the lesson. So some examples of these is when you're asking questions, don't react to the students who might be shouting at the answers. Really focus in on the students who are listening and want to raise with a quiet hand, because giving them that wait time and to really develop an answer can be helpful than choosing students who are jumping to conclusions and maybe not thinking about their answer right away. And then also really just by avoiding passive listening in terms of including the students in your closure. You don't want to just be lecturing to them. It's really important that they are a part of it. So instead of suggesting things and pointing out things that happen in class, use questioning to ask them and make them a part of the closure. So these are just a few pieces of advice that I would give to a novice teacher, and thank you for listening to all of them.